Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Two Blokes podcast. Today, Dead Duck and I are discussing America, what it's up to, what's wrong with it, and what might be done to make it work better. Pull up a stump and join us. So, as a
Oh,
dis as a disinterested third party, um, I guess, and curious observer, I guess I'd like to hear your take on it first, Ded. So
oh
take us
God,
away.
God. Right, okay. America is a strange one. It's a very, very young country that is trying to be an awful lot older. It's like a teenager. It's put on their parents' clothes and trying to behave like one of its parents, but it's not exactly getting it right. I mean, some of the conversations, the money in politics, race relations, all this sort of stuff is very, very unfortunate. Um, I mean, the physical country of the United States of America is in places absolutely breathtaking. I watch travel videos and vlogs and stuff, and I'm itching to come over because I really want to do the run from Chicago to California via Texas. It looks absolutely glorious, but I'd also be absolutely bleeding terrified um, because I don't know what sort of people I'm going to encounter. That's an unfortunate byproduct of the political system in America and also the social climate in America. You know, there is so much that could be done that would make the United States an awful lot better country for its citizens, let alone anybody else in the world. And there's an awful lot of questions I have for the politicians and everyone else because there's an awful lot of stuff I just don't get. You talk about your military, the US military for a second. It's meant to be all powerful, all sweeping, all encompassing, and everything else. And yet you've got multiple different methods of delivering a nuclear weapon. Why? You know, they've just renewed the B-52 um, Stratofortress, it's called. That aircraft is
Yeah,
going to have flown for well over 100 years by the time it had retired.
yeah,
You know, it says something for the design of the aircraft, definitely. I think it's the one design Boeing probably got right straight off the bat. They didn't do too bad on that one, and it's just been able to be regularly upgraded throughout its lifetime. But yeah, there is just so much when you look at America as an outside observer from somebody who, if you want to put it this way, lives in a socialist country, that you see, you hear, and you just shake your head thinking why. It would never happen over here. And I'm trying not to come at this with an arrogant form of moral superiority because I don't think that's going to do any good. But unfortunately, it's hard not to feel morally superior on occasions when you just see the state of the United States, the place it's gotten itself into when it didn't need to. So, yeah, I don't know where you want to take things from here. I mean,
yeah. Uh, the analogy to uh, teenager
mm,
and the like the corresponding imbalances in behavior and attitude
mm,
are really spot on. I mean, it really is that, you know,
mm,
it's this I don't know, awkward phase, right? In at least social and I don't know, maybe even, moral uh condition.
mm,
It's clear from a more seasoned
mm.
and mature standpoint that we don't know what we're doing. But the thing is, we're doing the hell out of it, right? Whatever it is we're doing it, we're going at it hammer and tongs.
Mm.
And it's like, for too long, that was enough, right? And that was a method for making progress,
Mm,
just push forward, power through it, go, go, go. Um, and, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, right?
yeah.
Oh, even when you're not, old and doddering like I am, there's just this underlying undercurrent of, this isn't gonna like do the trick forever, you know.
Mm.
And, I think starting honestly in all the wrong places, people in America started trying to account for that, slow things down, and I don't know, balance them out a little more. You know,
Mm.
before we started, we were talking about things like, the Second Amendment to our Constitution.
Hmm.
Now everyone knows that at the time when it was drafted, there was a fair or a pretty reasonable equilibrium between the the defense and aggression capabilities of the citizenry and the government.
Hmm.
Now we left that behind before I was born, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that hasn't been true for a long, long time,
Hmm.
so the idea that the Second Amendment, protects the citizens from the government, everyone kind of knows that's just, you know, unreasonable. It's not like that.
Yeah.
And that the idea of, the right to bear arms for self-protection against other citizens, I mean, at best, it comes at a cost,
Mm.
and some of that cost is, how do you say, it uh, makes it easy, to do things that without that uh, accommodation in place, it would be impossible.
Mm.
You know, but on the other hand, you know, especially the wild-headed Americans, we're clever and inventive and uh, not really given to just coloring inside the lines. If
Mm.
tomorrow morning we woke up and the Second Amendment was repealed and all the personally owned firearms were just like collected and taken away and disposed of, unfortunately, in the social and cultural climate we live in, it would, it's like it would have a temporary, and it would be a band-aid, you know.
Mm.
Um, but from any reasonable point of view, it's a band-aid on a gushing wound,
Yeah.
you know. Um, taking
There's.
away taking away the guns, now that it's one thing to have never had them,
Hmm.
then yeah, I think the underlying problems be a lot easier to address, but we have them now, and simply taking them away is no longer an answer, not all by itself, right? And that takes us into the territory of the state of being of the people that want them so badly. Is that the reason they want them so badly isn't anything as vaunted and noble as defense of self and community, right?
Mm.
It's unreasoning and uh thoughtless paranoia, and
Yes.
it's like, no matter, it doesn't matter if they never pop off around in anger, just the fact that they have it, like I say, that you know that's the cost of not taking them away,
Mm.
is that person's best possible outcome is to live out their lives knowing that they could do something with this deadly weapon, even if they never do.
Yeah. The
And
gun discussion is, I think, being framed wrong, not just in America, but all around the world when it comes to talking about Americans and guns. It's far deeper than whether or not you're going to take the guns away from the ordinary American citizen.
yeah,
And I mean, you're just saying about rampant paranoia and everything else. It's literally written into the U.S. Constitution to be afraid.
yeah,
The whole idea of the Second Amendment was to protect the people from a tyrannical government. Well, no US government has ever actually gone tyrannical for a start. The British aren't coming for America.
no,
The old joke is, you see that as you see yourselves as the independent, we see it as a lucky escape. We got away with that one. We dodged a bullet, so to speak.
right.
There is far, far more at play when it comes to gun ownership in America. And I think part of the reason that in the UK, after Dunblane, which I'm assuming you're aware of that one, are you?
The what? I'm sorry.
Dunblane massacre in Scotland
Oh no, I'm sorry.
in the mid 90s, late 90s. Former scoutmaster went into a primary school. So we're talking children sort of 5 to 7 years of age, and shot the school up in the school shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Within 1 year, the British government had completely changed gun ownership laws in the entire UK. So handguns and semi-automatic weapons are completely banned. You cannot own them. If you want a gun in this country, you have to have police background checks. You have to show that you have safe storage for the gun, locked safe storage for the gun.
Mm-hmm.
You also have to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. Now, the idea of having a gun for self-protection is ludicrous in this country. It just doesn't happen. Now, people in America falsely believe that means that we aren't allowed to protect our property. That's not the case. You have the castle law in this country, which basically means if somebody comes into, say you live in a two-story house, okay? If they come into the living room, which is generally on the ground floor, you can't do anything, okay? If they then come into sort of the private area of the house, so the bedrooms, then yes, you can.
Mm-hmm.
And what you can do is you can, if you push them down the stairs,
Mm-hmm.
and they die as a result of injuries sustained, well, chances are you are going to the police station under police caution
Mm-hmm.
for your actions, but there's also a good chance that you will not face any actual charges.
Yeah.
Because somebody has died, somebody is responsible for that person's death. What on earth has happened? Well, you pushed them down the stairs. Right, okay. Why did you push them down the stairs? They were in my upstairs area threatening my family,
Right.
etc. Okay, yeah, the chances are you'll be de-arrested and are free to go.
Right.
That's an extreme example.
Right.
You're not allowed to subdue the assailant and then carry on attacking them, because then
Right.
you become the aggressor.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But if they're subdued, there's really no reason to
Yeah.
continue
And yeah,
attacking.
it's like if you shoot somebody in the leg and they go down, they can't fight anymore. Well, you don't then go up to them and pop one in the forehead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's true over here too. I mean,
yeah, you've got to be. It's also, you cannot have a weapon for self-defense. If you happen to have, say, upstairs, tools for working on your car, for example, and you grab one of them,
right.
it's a weapon of opportunity.
Right.
Then that's fine.
Right. Or, cricket bat.
Yeah. Or, yeah. If you've got sports gear in the house, you happen to be a professional or semi-professional cricketer, for example, and you've got your coffin with all your gear, then that's fine.
Right.
You just happen to grab it and clear off kind of effort.
Yeah.
And if you hit them in self-defense, then that's fine. But you cannot, carry on after the person has been subdued. But going back to the discussion around Americans and firearms, you're never going to get the guns out of American hands. And I don't think that should really be the target here.
No.
I think, and you're not going to get people to agree to tighter gun control. So you need to work on the people themselves.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Why do most mass shootings happen? What's the underlying causes of most mass shootings? Well, it's a
Oh,
mental illness
man.
of some. It's a mental illness of some kind, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, uh, everyone who knows me knows that it would really, really take a lot to convince me that anyone, who went on a spree shoot wasn't wrong in the head.
Yeah,
I mean, I always take the position of, like, convince me that this person did what they did, in with sound mind,
yeah,
you know,
exactly.
and it's
So
like good luck.
yeah,
And when people say to me, that, and they do, or they say publicly that the answer to mass shootings is, banning firearms, because we don't want to hear the argument about this person being off their rocker,
yeah,
right? And I'm like, well, for one thing, again, this is America, and and now we have the internet, and
mm,
you know um like, high order explosives can be produced with stuff that's in most people's garages and under their sink.
yeah.
So do we want this type of individual to move from shooting bullets to just blowing the whole thing into orbit?
I think
Oh.
the best step is going to be preventing them from firing the bullets in the first place. And you know, I've had discussions with Americans about universal healthcare, and you always get, the thing of, well, taxation, and that actually you're not paying that much less in tax than we are now anyway,
Right.
on a scale of it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the government involved in healthcare. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
You're asking your government to do something with the money that you are providing them
Right.
through your taxation.
Right.
You're saying to the government, right, I'm going to give you X amount of money out of my wages every week, month, fortnight, however it is you get paid.
Mm-hmm.
What I want you to do with that money is something for me.
Right.
I have put you into this position. I have voted for you. I have, by my consent, asked you to make up the rules and laws of this country. Now
Mm-hmm.
you work for me, sunshine. This is,
Yeah.
I think this is part of the reason that so many people, I mean, we rag on the French in the UK, but it's, history going back a couple of
Yeah.
thousand years.
Yeah.
The one thing about the French citizens is their government is absolutely shit scared of them,
Right. Right.
because the government step out of line even for a second, bang, the whole country's on strike.
Mm-hmm.
They will shut Europe down.
Yep.
Main,
Yeah.
Mainland continental Europe shuts down as soon as anything happens that people don't like in France. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed that.
It's for us in the UK, it's bloody annoying because we can't get anything done on the continent. Nothing can come in or out. But
Right.
you have to admire the fact that the French public have got their government into such a situation where the government daren't step out of line, dare not impose a rule that will negatively affect the citizens
Yeah.
in too
I know.
drastic a way.
And for,
There's give and
for
take there, obviously, but
yeah.
this whole thing of, you don't like big government in America, but yet you are absolutely terrified of your government
Right.
as a
And,
as a
and
people.
for a republic that supposedly, fears and eschews big government, we have sort of a I don't know, Byzantine interlock and network of bureaucracy, just straight that the likes of which God has never seen before.
Yeah.
It's like we talk so, big chested about being independent and individualistic and not dependent on our government. But if you just lift the hood a little bit, man, it's got more moving parts and more uh really, you know, wasteful and redundant and like I said, interlocking uh uh I guess, elements that just really baffle and uh um it disempower the citizens paying for it. That places, like I say, places like France and the United Kingdom, um, and Australia, some parts of the Netherlands, if you all knew, just how wasteful and useless a lot of it is,
Mm.
it you would laugh, really. I mean, it's not that any one of these individual bureaucracies itself is particular. They're not necessarily even malicious,
Mm.
or desirous of disempowering the citizens. It's just the way the whole thing's put together, and the way it all you know uh interacts with itself,
Mm-hmm.
um, makes it honestly impossible, for an average American citizen to even understand why they're being prevented, from doing something that they want to do or being compelled to do something that they don't want to do,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and it's like the um, between the public policy arms and the actual legislative bodies and the law enforcement and court systems and the I could say the bureaucracies, the uh what you would call, social service uh entities,
Mm.
they spend most of their time, you know, just shoring up and ensuring the continued growth of each other,
Mm.
right? And what gets lost is any idea that the reason they exist in the first place was, at least in theory, that it was something people wanted or needed.
Mm.
And a really good example of that is our education system. You know, our our education system, again, in theory, it has one job, right? And that is to educate and prepare people who are not adults yet to become functioning,
Adults.
contributing adults. Who can at the same time remain, free of tyranny and free of uh, being beholden to or um, you know, indentured to anybody else.
Mm.
Now, I don't have to tell you how that has worked out so far. I
Yeah.
mean, the ones that that don't get enough of being told what to do once they become adults are lost.
Mm.
And I'm like, that's probably bad. I mean, people, it doesn't matter which part of the planet you're on, you know, if you get past, legal maturity, then if you don't already know, that there are certain things you have to do, certain things that you must not do, and that those two things will afford you the freedom to do what you want to do. If you
Mm.
don't have that, and I'm telling you out of my own experience, because I grew up and became an adult, I didn't have that, you
Yeah.
know. But if you don't, there's like a million different things that can go terribly wrong, but just an unheard of amount of good luck
Yeah.
would be involved in that kind of person, like coming out okay, right? And not
Mm.
having anything go terribly wrong. And that's just the education system, but regardless of what it calls itself and what it claims publicly, its number one job is to make sure that it stays in place,
Yeah.
right? I've
Yeah.
often said that the hallmark of a successful business is that they had a profitable year. The hallmark of a successful bureaucracy is that their, next year's budget is bigger because they were unprofitable
Mm.
or unsuccessful,
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the biggest positive changes America could make is to the healthcare system. And whether Americans like it or not, I'm sorry, but having the government in control of things like your healthcare is going to be infinitely better than private companies being in charge of it.
Right.
You
Right,
know,
because
oh,
at some point, uh, maybe there was a time when America did have a healthcare system, a system in place, whose job was to provide healthcare. We really don't have that anymore. We have a lot of competing, conflicting, and again, interlocking bureaucracies and private entities, once again, whose main job is to make sure that they remain profitable, or if they're part of the public sector, that they remain, um, you know, tenable and with an ever increasing budget.
mm,
Really, that's it. I mean, the one thing about it is, if you know if more people live a little bit longer, they can, that what that is to them is good PR.
mm,
you know I mean, they're not, it's not designed so that they can say we are successful and effective.
mm,
All it is something to put on a billboard, right?
yeah,
And it's like at some point it even becomes meaningless to us. It's like we get to the point where it costs so much and it's so difficult and complicated and so limiting that we don't care if we live longer or not.
mm,
And it's like that's not a very good attitude, but this is where
yeah,
we are. And I hate to beat the drum, but everything we're describing here, comes from the idea that the combination and the interdependence of uh, uh, a constitutional republic government funded by capitalism is the only way to go.
mm,
And the reason that still has such a stranglehold on everything is because for so long it was so useful and so successful for so many people. Now,
yeah,
I mean, the people I get into it on the left, who are very socialist, their thing is, capitalism is not legitimate, and it's oppressive, and creates a stable haves and have nots. And to that I say, I know that to be true. I mean, it's axiomatic that in
mm,
capitalism, anyone could become successful and wealthy, but it is by definition, it's physically impossible for everyone to become successful and wealthy. I mean, it's those two systems oppose each other diametrically and
Yeah,
mutually.
yeah,
So it
and
can't be done, but
yeah,
at the same time, it did enough for enough people for enough time that it becomes, like I say, it becomes a PR problem. How do you start bad mouthing something that did so much for so many? And
yeah,
all they had to do was just continue ignoring the fact that it was done on the backs of other people that never had a chance.
yeah, yeah. And it's not just, you know, sort of money in healthcare or money for healthcare. It's also the money in politics as well, and the fact that the private organisations have got the ear of the government and what have you. I mean, I think there needs to be a massive revolution in America, and the people need to stand up and say, "Look, we don't work for you. It's the other way round." I mean, the other thing is, employee or employment rights for the average employee. Now, I get, it's something as simple as having days off, right? I get
Mhm.
25 plus days holiday per year. That doesn't include public holidays, which I also then get.
Right.
I had a day off for the coronation. I had a day off for the Queen's funeral.
Right.
It's silly stuff like this. I mean, how much better would Americans be if they had access to decent healthcare? And I'm not talking, being able to go to the doctor. I mean, proper healthcare and not just
Yeah.
for physical ailments either.
Right.
Access to proper employment rights,
Yeah.
yeah, where it was basically if you're sick, you don't go to work, and if you have leave available, you take leave. You have a week off from your job. You don't,
Hmm.
the, obviously the culture in America is grind, 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 grind.
Right.
At say 65 or 70, you retire, you hang the tools of your trade up and you go outside and you smell the roses. How much different would American culture be if you had those things? Keep all your guns and everything else, yeah? But let's also have these things over here. Let's have the healthcare. Let's sort the education system out because it is a joke over there, to be quite honest with you. Let's sort out basic employment rights. Let's sort out you being able to call it a day at 65 years of age.
Yeah.
I think over here now it's actually 67, but
Yeah.
that is what it is. Let's not have 85-year-olds in a factory somewhere working themselves essentially until they get put into a box
Yeah.
because that's what happens.
Hmm.
I've seen enough, read enough, and heard enough that I know that is how American work culture is.
It
You know, as
is. It
as
is.
I've said about the education system over there in the States, it is a joke. It is absolutely appalling. I mean, I've seen and heard so many things which just make me think, do you understand what in the fuck you are talking about? You get these young black Americans that are talking about having separate areas for blacks and whites. Yeah, we tried that.
Mhm.
Jim Crow and everything. Are
Yeah.
you reg as it what's the lady's name on the back of the bus?
Rosa Parks.
That's the one, Rosa Parks.
Yeah.
Rosa Parks is a national hero to many black Americans. Why? Because she decided I'm not putting up with this bullshit anymore. I'm going to sit on the back of this fucking bus.
Yeah. Well,
You're not
it's
doing this to me anymore. You're not doing
it's
this to my people anymore. I'm going to sit on this fucking bus, whether these
here
white people like it or not. Now,
here if to hmm, I'm going to step out on a limb here. Mostly because well, really due to everything else, the efforts of people like Rosa Parks and Dr. King
mm,
and even Malcolm X and Kwame Ture, a pretty long list of people, uh, because their efforts, and their maybe what you would call uh heroism, got so maybe mainstream popular so quickly, that not enough changed quickly enough
Mm.
in order of like all the things you listed previously, education, healthcare, it employment stability. I mean,
Mm.
forget about security, but just like employment being, you know, a focal point, like
Mm.
all those things were bungled so badly, but during and after the time of these people that the more radical activists for for racial justice have said, we don't even want to be with you anymore. Right.
Mm.
Now, I have a little empathy for that, being a person in recovery, right? All of the heroes and the icons of the recovery movement, their number one goal was that we not be exiled anymore, right?
Mm.
That we figure out whatever kind of way we have to so that we can rejoin society.
Mm.
And more all the time, I used to think I was alone in this, but maybe not. Those of us in recovery are taking a look at the society that would have, you know, exiled us before, um, and saying, maybe I'm not in a hurry to come back, right? Because this looks bad, right?
Mm.
And it looks like getting back into it would put me right back where I started, and I really don't want to go back there. So better that I should just leave you all alone, you
Mm.
know. Um, but even that position, right? I mean, other than it being, rhetorically effective. When I say that to people, there's kind of a shocked silence in the room sometimes,
Mm.
right? It's like it gets attention, right?
Yeah.
But even so, right? Um, if if the social order and the society that I am keeping a little distance from would straighten up and fly right, I would be happy to come back.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have like some kind of innate antisocial character. I'm just waiting until the fires go out and the rubble settles down.
Mm.
you know but again, most people aren't like that just by nature. They're they want to be part of, right?
Yeah.
And the list of things that you mentioned, uh the healthcare system and the education system, employment, and like public service, everything from law enforcement to uh, like fixing the roads, right? They're, like I said, these are things that are in disarray.
Yeah.
And one of the big reasons why why it's in so much disarray is just because of the fact that as individualist, anti big government types, we never had that much faith in the government's ability or willingness to handle these things properly anyway. So
Yeah.
it was always very begrudging to give them anything, you know.
Mm.
Um, but at the same time, and again, I use the United Kingdom often as an object example that it can be done. I mean, it can be like healthcare, I'll use as an example, can be made, a government organ, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can be done. it would look much different here than it does there, just because of our culture and as a matter of scale. There's just a lot more of us, you know.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that all of that would have to be accounted for. Somebody with brains would have to sit would have to sit down and say, okay, the UK does it like this. This part of it would work, this part won't. This part would work a little bit, but doing it that way would be even better,
Hmm.
and say, okay, this is how it's going to be, you know.
Yeah.
And like I said, if we were rational, if Americans were rational and thoughtful, then we would say, okay, let's try that. And if it doesn't work, we'll tinker with it until we get it right.
Yeah.
But we don't do that, right?
No.
We have a tantrum, every time there's an idea to hand some liability over to to the government to do something about, we have a
Mm.
hissy fit, you
Yeah.
know
But there's
and
no hissy fits over what there is on the left side of politics in America, I think. But there's no hissy fits over spending on the military. Now, military culture in America is a massive thing. I know that.
yep,
There's an awful lot of pride in your military. I mean,
yep,
one thing the internet has done is allowed that to be dialed back somewhat. And what I mean by that is Americans now, if you watch a lot of YouTube reaction stuff and what have you with Americans, they'll watch stuff about, say, the Gurkha Regiment, the
hmm,
British SAS. They'll watch the Jeremy Clarkson documentary on the Victoria Cross and on the raid on Saint Nazaire during the Second World War. They'll watch documentaries on stuff like the Battle of Britain. But the other big one that gets an awful lot of attention is Exercise Sky Shield. Now, this goes back to when you were a little whippersnapper, Taz, and that
hmm,
was
hmm,
um, basically the Americans asked the British to assist them in judging their defensive capabilities, and the Americans got their asses handed to them
hmm,
in 1960 and 1961. So Sky Shield 1 and 2.
hmm.
Now, the second time we did it, we flew the exact same attack profile with the exact same aircraft to the exact same targets, right? We had an I think it worked out as something like an 85% success rate. So over the 2 years, out of 16 sorties flown, 14 were successful. And one of the aircraft landed in New York. And the only time air traffic control knew he was in the area was when he radioed for landing permission. You know, what happened in 1962? You had the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah,
And when it comes to the American military, I think the rest of the world looks at it and goes, "It's all the gear and no idea."
yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah. That really is the worst part of it.
mm.
Is and
and
like,
that's
for
and I just want
potential for
to,
catastrophe, having access to that level of destructive capability,
mm.
and having leaving it, like I said, in the or with the leaving it with the potential, right, for I don't know, uh like the Cuban Missile Crisis, the potential for a single misunderstanding
Yeah,
to result in that level of destruction and catastrophe. It we what we did with that was we canonized President Kennedy.
mm.
I mean, we elevated him to sainthood because
Hmm.
it didn't end up in a catastrophe.
Yeah.
Like, congratulations, right?
Well, there's
But
there's certain stories I've heard about why it didn't actually end up in a catastrophe, and that was basically because the British Prime Minister at the time said, "You do realise that we have the Royal Air Force at the end of the runway on 5 minute alert,
right,
armed and ready to go. So
right,
sit down and talk this out
right,
because you
yeah,
both know what we are capable of."
Yeah.
by that
Yeah.
point, which is what they did. And this is not to take away from the courage of any American who has ever served in the U.S. military.
Well, no, that's the whole point. It was enough courage to, you know, like stop for a moment and
Mm.
listen to the prime minister and say, oh, yeah, you know, there are other countries.
Yeah.
How about that? You
Mm.
know, thank goodness, you know, we can turn this over to a cooler head at least long enough, you know, to sit down and talk.
Yeah.
Like I said, you know, the thing is that, you know, it doesn't always play out that way, right? You know, always it doesn't always mean, you know, that somebody is going to pull a rabbit out of a hat and, you know, be the coolest head in the room and be more grown up than anybody else.
Mm.
So far, that's the way it has turned out, you know, and so far, as a result, we haven't, you know, like blown ourselves up, which is good. But you
Yeah.
know, even short of that, because you know, especially after the Cuban Missile Crisis and after a couple of broken arrows, you know, the whole idea of um, you know, nuclear weapons and defending against nuclear weapons is, you know, an academic exercise. I mean, there is no, you know, there's no means to ever deploy nuclear weapons and not have it turn into a everybody loses situation. That's just the way it is, you know.
Yeah. That's what the
You know,
Cold War was about, was the theory of
yeah,
mutually assured destruction.
right.
And
And now, you know, because there are so many separate and sometimes disparate entities, you know, governments that have access to, when you say world-ending destruction, you know, it's basically off the table as long as we keep everything else in line. And that's what people generally tend not to talk about, is the fact that, okay, you know, now we all know we can do this and we all agree that we don't ever want to do this. But now what that means is we have to talk about everything else. And we have to talk about every other kind of conflict and every other kind of military aggression and military defensive stance. You know, because any and all of them, you know, and again, this is the thing that nobody even wants to talk about. Any and all of them have the potential for somebody to push the wrong button at the wrong time.
yeah.
You know, and it doesn't even matter if it's a ground skirmish. If it's the wrong ground skirmish in the wrong place at the wrong time, it could still end up erasing us.
Yeah.
That sucks. I mean, you know, uh it was never like that, you know, anywhere in the past. But now it is like that, and it's going to be like that from now on.
Yeah. It
You
definitely
know,
is. It definitely is. I mean, I think you and I have obviously monopolized the conversation quite a bit here, Taz. So I'm going to suggest that we bring our young friend, the tall lady, and young Mal into the conversation and see what they think of, obviously the country that they both call home, because they both are in America. What problems they see, what solutions they see. I know Tall Lady has been to other parts of the world, so maybe she can talk about her experiences with other cultures. And obviously, Mal, although not native to the United States, lives there now. So, Tall Lady, Mal, one of you like to jump in?
Um, Hi everyone. Just a heads up. Can you guys hear me without sounding robotic?
Clear as a bell,
Yes.
mate. Clear as a bell.
Yeah.
Oh, cool, cool. So when it comes to my experiences with America, in my opinion, the greatest strength of this country is beyond the economic the great economic output and all of that. Like the majority of people who immigrate there are like economic migrants. But beyond that, in my opinion, it's Like that, in my opinion, is what makes it like so far superior compared to any others. Like having very robust liberal institutions, that really like counters a lot of corruption. And even though the country is not perfect, it's like mild.
Well,
Am I the only one who can't hear Mal right? Or
yeah, I was able to hear him.
Yeah, yeah, I'm back, I guess.
Mm.
So,
Well,
can you guys hear me?
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I can
No,
hear you.
Mao is saying that the strength of the United States is basically, our economic output, GDP, and our liberal institutions. And this is my beef with, apologies to you, Dead Duck, with everyone who is critical of the United States, including me, is that both of those things are true. Uh, we, at least in theory, have liberal institutions coupled with, innovative and driven, economic structures. We make it possible to put out a lot, but as I've said, and I blame largely my own generation for this, that's a very powerful thing, and it requires management. It requires attention. It requires careful handling. It's great to say that we have liberal institutions and, uh, unparalleled defensive capability, and, economic output, productivity, that's never been seen before, right? But to say that, that solves everything and, no muss, no fuss, that's why we are where we are. That's why things are in such disarray. Dead Duck, you were mentioning the French earlier, and how they handle their government, and by extension, their economic entities, their businesses. The citizens cause apprehension and circumspection out of fear. I mean, they are afraid of the French government, and French business has a healthy fear of its citizens and its consumers. I mean, there was a time really not that long ago where, they were cutting the heads off people in the government that they didn't like routinely. It's not that bad anymore, but I mean,
I don't know about
like,
that one.
you know,
We've lost a couple assassinated presidents in Latin America,
I know,
and that
but
was
I'm
more recent.
saying, true, but I'm saying that, it wasn't like the presidents that got assassinated in the United States. There was never any sense that, that was a just consequence, for uh for unsatisfactory performance. It was treated like the either, a lone gun nut, in the case of Kennedy's assassination, or, in the case of Lincoln, it was just because of the fact that, he won the Civil War, and that the assassin was, was not domestic, technically speaking. He was a Confederate. There was no Confederacy anymore, but he was a Confederate. And over there in France, the people operating the guillotine were just the French people. Now I don't get me wrong, it's like I certainly don't think that is a solution, but especially in my generation, between between the businesses that were and have been and still are, putting out so much productivity, and the government and its attendant bureaucracies that are supposed to be in place, to keep it all in order, we just totally ignored it. We just said, well, it's all working as designed and I'm happy. And now, the results are that both of those things, both our federal government and corresponding state and local governments and our businesses have kind of hit a wall, where they can't, the businesses can't keep their consumers happy, right? And the government can't keep its constituents happy. And the constituents / consumers, don't even know how to respond back saying, here's what we want you to stop doing and here's what we want you to start doing, because we're too busy, peeing on each other. Oh, like I said, it's, it would be great if, like Dead Duck was saying, Americans kind of came together with one voice and said, all is forgiven. Let's let bygones be bygones, but let's stop doing what we've been doing and start doing something different, because what we've been doing has stopped working. It's no longer effective and we're wasting our time and our money and our resources. I was saying to Dead Duck that the most silent and the most taciturn, like, I don't know, apathetic element in all this is men. We are, American men are too apathetic. We're too distracted, and we're too faithless, in each other, ourselves, and the people that aren't men. We just can't visualize the idea that we could all stand up together and say this has to change. It's just,
The theory to that. Oh my
Huh?
God, my voice. I was like, can I give a theory to this?
Sure.
Because this actually, man, this is the perfect talk actually, because this aligns very much so with a book I've been reading the last couple of days on leadership in minority communities. It was recommended to me by one of the what was she, top influential Latinas of the U.S. She made the list this year. I got to meet her.
All right.
But it was interesting because the book had sort of brought up this issue about the issue of what it called, Western leadership. This book obviously is more focused on the U.S. and it was talking about how you sort of got this issue of leadership in this country that's the more modern country, and because of that, it felt like it needed to create its own modern ideas. And so in many ways, the US started the whole idea of individualism that we see today. We used to have this we, the community, etc., so forth, other people, all of us kind of attitude. And that's dwindled into more of a, every man for themselves, good luck kind of deal. And it was sort of interesting because when it was talking about that, of course, and this is a book on minority leadership, it talked about how minority communities, in our cultures, there is a lot of us and we, which, to be honest, although I called the US home, so I find the US a little weird on my own. I grew up with that idea too. We, the family. But it brought up, actually, funny enough, with your generation, it brought up that sort of around your generation is when it sort of noted that. So I'm like trying to find the best way to put it, because it explained that when the US came into creation, it was around the time in European history where there was this real sort of flipperoo, not very professional words here, on, religion and theoretical ideas. And so those new ideas is what got brought over to the US. But there was some we concept, but since there's a lot of incentivism about conquering, finding new places, individualism because of those new ideas and this new incentivism for conquering brought this sort of individualistic English leadership type, in a sense, to America. But then America came up with patriotism, which was their sort of version of we. But then around the 70s, 60s, end of the 50s, we sort of saw this flip with the social movements where we saw patriotism, quote unquote, basically die. So the mask of we that was on top of the original individualistic sort of leadership type started breaking down. But here's the interesting thing, and this is where people may or may not turn against me here. But since leadership had been primarily male and they had gotten so used to using the mask and their roles and the whole idea of we, because they thought they were, using the we in their community, even though it was really behind the scenes individualistic, men were not adapting as easily to the now completely disappeared mask, to the only me, myself, and I. And because of the me, myself, and I, that's why we've got the situation where our leadership right now in the US is, to put quite frankly, quite crappy. Because they're not thinking the community, they're only thinking themselves. And the guys who are not the upper class politicians are really just at a loss because they were basically trained to be the face of the fake we that America came up with to hide the I, if that makes any sense. That was really the best way I could summarize what the book said.
No, that nails it. I mean, I grew up in it. I am that guy, and I can tell you what you just described matches my experience, as an ordinary guy. And like I said, if it had worked, then this would be paradise, but practically speaking, like, me, myself, and I, thinly veiled by this, kind of, I don't know what you would even call it, a phantom we, just a phantom idea that's this bizarre mix of patriotism and just America is great. In other words, it didn't work. I mean, it didn't do what was promised, and the one, like, a common thread in minority leadership that I grew up with and that I still see to this day, is focusing on the community, in the face of this dominant culture, which is, I mean, for lack of a better word, fraudulent, and I can sit back and say, well, nobody told me this was a scam, right? Nobody told me that the whole thing was a hoax, so you can't blame me. And I can certainly make the case that I can't be, I and all other guys like me can't be blamed, but to steal, an axiom from somebody in minority leadership, just because I'm not to blame doesn't mean that I'm not responsible, and for a lot of guys like me, we individualize it, and we personalize that whole concept too much, because that's all we ever had, was, if I say I, the only person I'm talking about is me, my own self personally, and it's like, that's not only foolish, right? Because I am not the only guy like me, by any means at all. Not only is it foolish, but it means that I'm preventing myself from even doing anything about it. To this day, I still get asked by people, why do you persist in, standing up and speaking out and, all of that stuff. And I'm like, well, I only, really only because I know that not doing that doesn't work. It doesn't do anything, right? And in the meantime, I kind of just die a slow, miserable death. So I would just personally rather not do that, but all around me, right? With too few exceptions, especially men that are either not minority, or even if they are, they kind of have a mainstream type of life. They're not standing up, they're not speaking out. Some of them are lashing out, yeah, and some of them are backlashing out, but they're not speaking out, and they're unwilling to join, because joining, the fear is, if I join a community, a movement, whatever the case may be, I surrender my individuality. The ironic thing is, I've never felt more like an individual than I do now. And back when, I wasn't joining anything, I didn't feel like I didn't feel like a person, right? I was just a amorphous lump, and like I say, the guys that either it hasn't gotten bad enough yet, or there's just too much fear. They look like lumps to me now. They look like just immobile, right? Distracted, self-disempowered. And again, I can't point a finger at them, and I can't, scold, because I was that guy for longer than some of them have even been alive. Right? And, so the only message I can carry, right, is that I know for a fact, out of my own experience and out of the experience of others like me, that what you are doing will fail, right? And you will pay for that failure, possibly even with your life. And if not that, you will certainly sacrifice your well-being, and your sense of yourself, and your ability to make any progress. So your choices are simple: either stay where you're at and exist alone, right? Or jump in, join in, say what you have to say, right? And do it with the voices that overlap with yours. Yeah, yeah, be French.
Hi again, by the way. I
Hello.
kind of left because of my internet connection. If it's okay, I would like to continue what I was saying before I was cut off by my internet provider.
Go for it.
Go for it.
Yeah. So what I was recapturing, what I was trying to say is, in my opinion, what makes America one of the best countries to live in is the liberal institutions. It's even if you have a corrupt politician, they have to jump through so many hoops to be corrupt because of the liberal framework. And you can force anyone to agree with this. Even the people that hate Trump and they believe that he was an evil fascist, they will admit that he did very little fascism because of the liberal framework. We know that Trump was saying that he was trying to get a lot of politicians in jail, but he couldn't. He was trying to do I don't know, the recounting of the votes or whatever, and he couldn't do it. some people might say that he was delusional. Some people might say that he was intentionally trying to destroy the country or whatever, whatever. But in my opinion, like whatever those two versions, like he couldn't, because the liberal framework is so strong. And in my opinion, the real thing that is destroying this country, it is the anti-liberalism, and we have we like the America as a country has been carrying the tiny attacks of anti-liberalism for a very long time, and eventually it all culminates. Like for example, currently the court system, the family court system, is very like anti-liberal when it comes to men, for example. Like many of our laws are very anti-liberal, and eventually, like we can carry on until it all explodes. So for a while, we can like ignore some problems, but eventually it goes out of hand. A lot of people go even further back, like for example, slavery was very anti-liberal, and it was allowed to continue until it couldn't no longer, you know. But in my opinion, like that is the true attack on America, like the breaking down of the liberal institutions and being replaced with like I don't know, Marxist institutions or whatever other variants, religious institutions, ethnic institutions. And for example, I always like to give some perspective, like I like to compare America to China, for example, because China is like the most anti-American country there is. Like for example, like the American dream is like all about individuality, and you can be free and whatever, and anybody can come into the country and be happy and free and be an American, you know. Which is something that doesn't really exist anywhere else in the world. Like if you go to I don't know, if you go to Russia, you're always gonna be like an immigrant there. You're never gonna be truly Russian because you know you don't have the correct ancestry. You know you don't speak the correct language or the correct accent or whatever. So like in contrast, like for example with China, like if you talk, China is like an ethno nation, and if you talk to like immigrants from China, they always tell you like their family members and their own government tells them that they need to remain mentally and ethnically Chinese at all times, no matter where they go. Like wherever they go, they need to be Chinese and be with China, like like in mind and spirit and all of that. Like China has their souls or whatever. That is like absolute collectivism, contrast with like American individuality. And like so in my opinion, like the individuality is not really the problem. Is the breaking down of like liberal institutions and replacing them with alternatives, which are much worse, like collectivism, for example. And when it comes to like the discussion on like the civil rights movement, unfortunately, we all saw how it all turned out, like how the civil rights movements, they all began with a liberal framework, you know, like we won the American dream that was denied to us, you know, and it's all fine and it's all perfect there, and then it slowly morphed into a denial of the liberal framework. There is no American dream. It's all a lie. The country was built on racism, and you're never going to be an American truly. That's how it became. It became like an anti-liberal movement, and that's what we see with some people. I mean, there still remain some civil rights leaders that are still serious liberals, and they're still worth listening to. But that's where unfortunately it goes to. It's and I do have some very specific like criticisms, but that's in my opinion what it all leads to personally, because like everyone wants to be part of a community, but I think that, like in my opinion, destroying the liberal institutions makes it so people don't want to be part of a community because there's nothing to gain from it. Because again, if you destroy individualism, then you replace it with forced collectivism. So if you truly want a community, you have to surrender everything to the community instead of being like a happy individual living inside a community of your choosing, you know? So I would like to ask if anybody wants to talk about that specifically.
Well, I think if I may, you know, everything you just described about the power and flexibility and versatility of liberalism, it is all of that. You know, it's a better solution than mindless collectivism. I mean, you brought up China. You know, they're very good at making sure there are always a lot of Chinese people, you know, and kind of outside of that, you're right. You know, they believe so strongly in the collective, you know, in the sort of, you know, phantom greater good that never comes. They're, you know, they've condemned themselves to being stuck with that into the foreseeable future. You know, and for us, you know, at least the idea is that, you know, liberal institutions and individual initiative, like I said, that's very powerful and very versatile, you know. But the one thing, and again, especially, you know, the kind of people that I grew up with, and the kind of people that I've spent most of my life with, they, for whatever reason, seem to believe that those things have an autopilot. You know, that once you have liberal institutions and once you have individual initiative in place, that, you know, it requires no management and it requires no attention. And the kind of things, Mao, that you were talking about, you know, the encroachment of blind, unreasoning Marxist style collectivism, you know, that it makes those institutions ripe and low hanging for them to come and pick. You know, there are some institutions that went from liberal and progressive and clear-headed, you know, to just, like I said, kind of blindly collectivist and, you know, uncaring and unconcerned with the individual. And one, you know, the one that springs to mind first is institutions like the American Psychiatric Association. You know, they just fell for that hook, line, and sinker, right? And you know, there's question about whether they can be you know, reclaimed from that. It's just a dead soldier. You know, it's that way and it's never coming back. That's why people even in that line of work are, you know, either starting to give up, right, or and go do something else, or, you know, they are making a community and trying to fight back. You know, and the other part of it is that some of the liberal institutions didn't fall victim to collectivism, but they did fall victim to corporatism. You know, it's like the average Joe, like myself, you know, over here in America, we stand in a canyon between two towers. You know, on the one hand, you've got looming, mindless collectivism that couldn't care less if I live or die, right? You know, and if I die, that's good because it makes room for somebody else. You know, and on the other side, you've got corporatism like I said, it's really been great at funding and supporting liberalism for a long time. But it carries the seeds of its own demise because it does that only for the sake of being profitable itself. And at some point, like I said, it either abandons to the collectivists or it corrupts, into their own fold the public institutions that people like me always blindly believed in and said, well, we've got education, healthcare, law enforcement, and public public service, public works, fixing the roads, stuff like that. It's all in place and it's on autopilot. All I got to do is pay my taxes, and it'll all be good forever. And of course, the malicious and the ideological and the just wrong-headed people came along and said, wow, nobody's even looking at this stuff. I think I'll take it and use it for myself. The civil rights movement, it started out, Dead Duck and I were talking earlier, it started out with the idea that the people fighting and struggling for civil rights ought to be fully enfranchised and fully part of the society that they were currently stuck in. That's a good goal and a good idea, but same thing, they got it all in place and they got it all going, and they just sort of, hit the autopilot and went back and had a sandwich. And the next thing we've got like BLM buying $4 million beachfront property, and among other things. And well, it's like just a laundry list of various corruptions and wastes and misdeeds. But like I said, it's done by the people who just wait for ordinary persons, ordinary community members, ordinary men and women and everybody to just turn away for a second, to go about their business for 5 minutes, and they jump in and they take over. And like I say, they corrupt it and they pervert it to their own purposes, not for, any common good, or not for any progress, or, not for any kind of liberty, but just because it's good for them. I used to have more blind faith in liberal institutions. Now I have faith in liberalism, but maybe it's just a function of age, but I don't ever put faith in it blindly. I believe these are things that can be recovered and that they can be made, made to perform their purpose again. But I'm never again going to just say, well, it works all by itself.
Yeah. Well, like blind trust is always like a bad thing. And but I wanted to hear what the old lady has to say about it, because I think we play off each other, because I was responding to some of the things that she was saying.
Yeah, go.
Yeah, I was. It's just my complication is not with the idea that you were explaining, it's with the word that you used. I think Taz, at least to me personally, was a little more on the point when he said corporatism is really the issue. Because my problem with the word liberalism is it's a word that at least people my age don't even know the real definition for anymore. We have grown up with decades now of politicians calling themselves liberals who are doing anything but what actually liberalism is by definition. We don't know what liberal is. To us, liberals the Democrat Party. That's all we were told. Liberals, whoever's in the Democrat Party, liberals, whatever the hell they vote for. Nobody knows what liberalism really is at my age for the most part, to be completely honest. They say these words, they say conservative, they say progressive, they say liberal, they say extremists, but none of them actually knows what it means. They just say it because the news says it, and they think it makes them sound fancy. Like, I'm just gonna be honest about that. Political bullshit gets you quite far in conversation because you sound intelligent even though you don't know anything. And the thing is when it comes to what's considered liberalism on people my age and what liberalism actually is, it really is corporatism that's sort of become the problem, because it's become, back to the it's become people trying to find ways to profit off these different things. I don't like hearing the word liberalism because for me, it was never defined properly at all. Like, it was defined as, oh, whatever the Democrats want. You have all these social groups. Some of these toxic feminist groups who call themselves liberals, and they're totally going for liberalism, but instead all they're doing is backstabbing other women and all attacking each other. Some of these minority groups, there's some that are great, and there are some that are, well, as we were talking about civil rights, now it's BLM. You've got that situation where, it's a group that says, oh, we're liberal, we are presenting liberalism, and it's like, no, you really aren't. All these woke people think they are liberalism. They are practicing liberalism. All they're doing is being reverse racist because they're treating me. They went from just treating me because I'm stupid for being Hispanic to treating me like I'm stupid because they don't think I know about being Hispanic, although I'm Hispanic. What a fucking change. Either way, I come out stupid, apparently.
I do want to say something about that because there is
because they profit from making a class to teach me why I don't know about my own Hispanic issues, even though I'm Hispanic. There we go. I'm done.
Yeah, and I do wanted to talk about the history of co-opting liberalism, because when it comes to every single extreme political movement, any radical, what they do is they make sure to call themselves whatever the centrists are calling themselves. So if in the Overton window, the center is the acceptable politics of the time. So if the acceptable politics is liberalism, you're going to have a bunch of radicals calling themselves like liberals just so they can trick everyone else. That's the reason why we have so many insane anarchists, communists, national socialists, ethno-nationalists, feminists, and everything in between calling themselves liberals, because that is one really useful way of attacking the center. Because when you dilute the center and you widen enough, you can fit every single extreme into it. So in my opinion, it all began with the first wave of feminism, because the first wave was all about how men are on top and women just want to be on top with the men. That was the first wave. That was all that it was about. And in my opinion, that's when the first Trojan horse sneaked in, because if as Americans, if Americans accept the idea that the country was founded on sexism and misogyny, and men have all the power, they are buying into the extreme, the radicals, that want to destroy the country. Because all over the Southern, America is not like a normal liberal country that you can come in and be a normal person and be an American. It's an evil, antiquated country that needs to be destroyed, and from the new ashes, something better can come in. That's the problem, in my opinion. Yeah, and everything else that came from it is it's like a reverberation of the same attack. When it comes to the black nationalists, what do they say? They say the country was founded on racism, therefore it's never been good. It's never gonna be anything good. That's why it all has to be teared down. So that is the history, but they all call themselves liberals. That is a history of the slow corruption of liberalism. It's And obviously,
Because they don't understand that
yeah.
that they don't seem to understand the difference between how do you put it? Inglés, por favor. They don't seem to understand the difference between, and again, another thing from this little leadership minority book. It was a very good book. I will send it to you guys later.
Oh,
Yeah, Mal, you would like this one. But like that was another thing is like it brought up the fact that in minority communities a lot there's this idea of looking in the past, but you're not supposed to be saying that something needs to be destroyed or that you need to, look so far back. It says what you need to do is to acknowledge. That is the number one word. You acknowledge what happened. You say that, okay, it was wrong. And then you go, well, what do we do? How do we build from there? You don't
true.
ask for reparations and stuff. You all have to acknowledge together as a group that it was wrong. But you don't go and just try to hold on to something or like destroy something. That's not how it's supposed to work. And people don't seem to get that in the US. Like they seem like you have to destroy everything from the past to build the future, and that's not really how that works.
No, it isn't. I mean,
Well,
and honestly, all they're doing is ending up back in a circle.
yeah. But to be honest,
oh, go ahead.
like to be honest, like it all depends. Because like if you talk to a super radical progressive, they only talk about the past because they believe, or like they only talk about the past when they need to tear something down, because they believe that progress to the future is always good. So whenever they wanna like tear you down, they bring the past. They say how awful the past was and how the past was always terrible, and you are like spiritually encompassing the virtues of the past, the evil virtues of the past, and that's wrong because they believe the past is awful. And then when you have a radical that is not a progressive, a radical that is okay with like tradition or whatever, they talk about the past as always being good, So that's like the difference between those two radicals. But the important thing is like the two of them, the two types of radicals, they always try to trick liberals by appealing to our like sensibilities. Because like, for example, with the reparations
well,
and all of
they
that,
try to pretend they're normal. That's the issue.
Yeah,
if you ever
true.
notice in the news, they will never call the Democratic Party radical. They will never call liberal radical. But they'll do that for conservatives and Republicans, and that's an issue. They're refusing to acknowledge the fact that the only reason there's another radical is because there was the first radical.
Oh yeah, that's a pretty like good divide and conquer.
It doesn't just magically appear poof out of air. It's because there was something that caused it. It's usually because there was another radical there first.
Right.
True. And not only that, like if you disagree with them, if they cannot successfully appeal to you, if they cannot successfully trick you, they will call you a conservative, aka evil, So it's like any liberal that is dumb enough to be convinced by those tactics, they remain as liberals. But any liberal that is not tricked, they're called like an evil conservative. Even like obviously conservatives are not evil, and even though they are not evil, I mean, even though they're not conservative, that's a tactic.
Yeah, and the ones that are not conservative, that still push back on these are radical leftists. There aren't very many honest liberals anymore. There are a few, but not very many, and they don't get heard very often. But when I push back on leftist radicals, I always couch it in terms of, for most of the West, right? Because it isn't just America, it's for most of the West. You're proposing, a revolution, right? And an entire dismantling of everything, that you say is so oppressive and unjust and and evil, but to pull it all the way down, and you expect to then direct and support and construct something new that you believe is better, but in the hands of people that, to be honest with you, thinking only of the 800 million people in America, we're not prepared. We in America, we are not prepared to replace what we have now with anything except blind, unstable tyranny. We can't put a socialist paradise together to save our life. We can't do it. We're not ready, and maybe we won't ever be, and I tell them that, look, if you look forward to, a brand new day where capitalism and, hierarchies and this social order are just a dim memory, okay, well, that's fine, but understand who you're dealing with, understand the people, the individual people and the collective of those people, what they're capable of and, what they are not capable of. They simply are not ready, and 90% of it comes from the simple fact that we are people, and what you're talking about works great for termites. Our problem is we're not termites. All we are is people. And, you hear so often about the abject failure of collectivism on any scale, anywhere in the world. And that's why, it's because people are ignorant and selfish and frightened and paranoid and it just ill-equipped, to see the world you would like for them to see, because the world you would like for them to see, requires their hand and their attention and their effort, and their virtues every minute of every day, right? And I look out the window, in my little apartment here, and I see a whole courtyard full of people that have no idea how to make that happen. They just don't. And the leftist radical will say, well, we must educate. And I said, I got to be honest with you, but the education system, at least over here, has been under your effective control for a long time, and we're stupider than we've ever been. Right? I'm sorry, but that's what happened.
You're laughing, Dead Duck. It is seriously true.
So
I know
you may have the desire, for a generation to come that's intellectually and mentally and spiritually superior to the ones that are out there right now, but from everything that I see, it looks like you will never get there doing what you're doing.
Yep.
Like, if I have to be honest, Doug, I don't know if you've seen the Mario movie, but there's in the Mario movie a button that says devolve. That is what's happened to American education.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier on, Taz and I, about the American education system and what have you, and I was saying you've got young Black Americans calling for segregation. And we was obviously talking about Rosa Parks and the incident on the bus and what have you. It's like these people have not learned from that lesson in history. They're not going to learn from anything else that has happened in history. And
Yeah, true.
I think anyone who wants to push for absolute socialism, absolute capitalism, absolute communism, whatever, is an idiot. The best societies work on a hybrid of these political and economic systems. You need capitalists to create the wealth so that the people can have money they can then put back into the system for the government to then use to supply the citizens with the things that they need. And we spoke about guns Taz and I right at the very beginning of this, and I've said you're not going to get the guns out of people's hands. That's a ludicrous idea at this stage. But what you can do is improve the lives of the average American, because the 1% are the complete outliers. The people, the billionaires and everything else, and the millionaires, they're the complete outliers. They can afford to live their lives. The average American on the street cannot. I don't mean on the street as in actually physically living on the street, but the average man or woman cannot afford. They cannot afford to be ill. They cannot afford to lose their jobs. They cannot afford to go on a bleeding holiday.
Right.
And we're
barely affording to pay off our school debt.
Yeah, this is it. And I'm not one of these people who thinks that higher education should be free and it should be down to everybody else to pay for your education. If you want to go on to higher education, that's a choice you make. Therefore, you have to incur the costs for doing so. But I also think that, again, it's something that is a good idea on paper, but America has got it wrong. With us over here, if you don't make a certain amount of money, you just don't pay it back at the end of the day, and it essentially gets written off. And there is so much, 1 degree of change within American culture would make such a positive change to the society over there at large. As we said this earlier on, Taz and I, access to healthcare. I'm not talking about being able to go down and see your doctor. I'm talking about, out and out healthcare. The whole abortion argument would not go away, but it would certainly be lessened if people had access to, birth control that was either an awful lot cheaper, so $10 over there for a prescription for the pill or what have you, or only $10 for a pack of condoms, and people had access to half decent sex education. If you go around having unprotected sex, what's going to happen? Well, children. That's what happens. And teaching young men and women the consequences of their actions. That if you do something, this is the net result. If you go around having unprotected sex, you're going to end up with children, and that you have to take responsibility. You have to
I
take
really don't think
responsibility.
that's gonna work, to be honest.
Well, it works in most other places in the world.
Because
you look at
in my opinion, what you need is very strong parents who punish teenagers from doing that. Because I think that works.
It's education again. I'm talking.
It is, and it's education not only of the constituent young folks, but education for the people that are supposed to be responsible for them. It becomes an infinite regress where, the further you step back from it, the more you see that, like I said, at some point, you kind of have to start over, right? And you kind of have to, one very painful admission to all of this, is that we've got some unrecoverable generations, that are going to be with us for a while, right? And, the unfortunate solution that people come up with for that is authoritarianism, we put in place policies and enforcements and authorities basically to say, we don't care if you go along with this or not, this is the way it's going to be, and like I said, that is an actual slippery slope, where if you say in order to to right the ship and get it back on course, we're going to have to throw some people overboard. Humans were like that for a long time, right? And it's very attractive. It's very seductive to say all we have to do, is eliminate the riffraff, but right now, at least in America, unfortunately, there's a lot of riffraff. I mean, there are a lot of
Um,
people that are just really not. I'm not talking about institutions, and I'm not talking about, policymakers, or I'm just talking about regular old citizens, that it would be very difficult to get them to accept and act on that education. And it would take a long time. And in the meantime, they're still running around getting laid.
Yeah.
You know what I
I-
mean?
I do have something to say about that. Like, in my opinion, like education is not really like the solution, because like everyone already knows, like, if you have unprotected sex, like you like high risk of getting pregnant. But in my opinion, it's like the breaking down of the family structure, because like if you have a family that will severely punish you for like having sex out of wedlock and getting like a random woman pregnant and vice versa with the woman, like that is an actual deterrent. But like if you actually analyze like who is actually engaging in such a risky behavior, is like teenagers that come from like single
broken
parent
homes.
households,
Yeah. The problem
that
is that's a bottle you're not going to be able to recork.
Well, not
It-
very easily anyway,
no, it's
because in the past, historically, that was one of the major functions of things like religion. And speaking of, the bottle uncorked, um, if religious institutions had managed themselves properly over time, they would still be in place, and things like birth control and family structure, and community, civic mindedness, the community responsibility would still be in place. But they blew it, you know, and they blew it spectacularly. I mean, the reality is that, a person believing in, a higher being of any sort, notwithstanding, the churches in communities served those functions for a long time. But rather than, sticking with that, right, they went completely off the reservation and lost, they lost their credibility. People don't believe in them, like myself. I am convinced that there is a creator, of some sort, right? I don't go to church. I haven't been to church in a long time, and it is, it I look at it like what has happened here, it doesn't increase or decrease my capacity to believe in a higher power. What has happened has been, a lot of like shenanigans and corruption and really, really dark behavior from the people who were, who were telling us that they were the representatives of this creator, right? They failed, past tense. Like, this isn't something, that is going to happen that we could prevent. It already happened. The patient is dead, and I'm like, well, that's okay, but don't expect me to try to resurrect it, so we
yeah.
have to do something else, right?
But
We have
like in my opinion, like and we know that like religious institutions are not coming back unless there's a massive event. But in my opinion, like the
Unless
biggest
Jesus comes
problem.
back to Earth.
Oh yeah, exactly. Well, if you talk to the Jews, they will tell you like the real Messiah can come too, But quote unquote the real.
I'm ready
But
anytime, man.
yeah. But like the biggest problem that I've seen personally is like you got these teenagers and they have unprotected sex because they know like if the woman gets pregnant, she can just go to get an abortion, and if she doesn't get the abortion, she can just give it up for adoption. and even if she keeps the child, she's gonna be on welfare for like I don't know how long. And so there's so many backup plans that we give to people, and we throw free money at them, and that's why they won't ever face like the consequences of their actions. Because
Right.
if we, like, in my opinion, I think it's an absolute wrong to give free money to people just for getting pregnant, like giving like free money to like pregnant women. Because like if you have a system in which like for example back in the past, like the welfare system was very weak, so therefore if you get pregnant, you need to have a job, like you need to be competent enough and have a grown-up mind to get a job so you can feed your child or whatever. Nobody's gonna give you free money, and the majority of women, they opted for like getting a husband because of two incomes instead of one. That's better. So there you already form a family. But now we have replaced like the need for a husband and the need for a job with just the government. The government is gonna give you like money without having a job, being at 16 years old. Uh, and you don't need a husband anymore to raise the child because you already have the government's money and whatever. So in my opinion, that's where I'm seeing the biggest problem. Like, I'm seeing in that direction specifically, like just
Yeah.
throwing free money so people won't face the consequences of their actions.
Yep.
It's
And
sort of
that's the kind of thing that, further disempowers men, fathers specifically, and replaces it with everything you just described about that, that comes from the corporatist side. They get more power and more influence as people are led to believe that throwing money at its solution, right, is the way to go. Right.
and that's like not
That
the
doesn't
only
come from,
corporatist part.
no, I
I
mean,
feel like
there's a lot more to it, but specifically, just like birth control and abortion, those are, corporatist lobbyists and corporate uh captains of industry, whatever, they love that stuff because the more money that's required to keep that going and to keep it, desired in the eyes of the people, the more powerful they become, the more
well, it's not just
influential.
those items either, though. Like, I don't want to make it sound like this conversation isn't useful. Like, but to be honest, and that seemed like we're like a chicken with its head cut off running around. It's a mix of everything everybody's saying. It's a mix of the family structure going down. It's a mix of the welfare system being strengthened. Yes, there's some people who really need it, but there is the counter effect that it also does somewhat incentivize higher sex. There is a slight need for more sex education. That's true. There is a sense that parents need to be taught more. And believe me, I know that more than anyone. I was a summer counselor, and let me tell you, oh, no offense to parents, but you are the worst with your own children. Lord knows you spoil them to hell and back, and you don't teach them. And like parents don't seem, and there's another portion of it too, which is like keeping politics out of the home. People should be more informed about politics, but you need to stop bringing it in the home. Because I seriously need to stop explaining to kids why the N word, the B word, hookers, and other things are bad at 10 years old. Why are you talking about this in front of your kids? Why am I explaining Democrat, conservative, and all that to a 10-year-old? Because you refuse to do so. And then I tell them to go back to their families, and their families say it's my fault. And I'm saying it's not. And then they won't stop saying it. So I got to say, look, it's a bad thing to say. It has a negative comment. Like, I try the best way without trying to explain what it is to tell them that's not a great thing to say at camp. Like, obviously, I'm no longer a camp counselor, thank Jesus. But, like, back when I was, that was half my day. And it was quite annoying. And then there's another part of it, too, that's just sexualization in society. I'll be honest, like, it's sort of scary to me. Like, I was at the mall recently. I'm in my 20s. My age group is supposed to be buying, dresses and crop tops and stuff like that. And I got these two girls in front of me that both are about 11
Yeah.
buying that kind of clothing. You know,
I
I'm
have
seeing
seen that.
all these TikTokers who are 11, 12, you know, these TikToker parents who are dressing their kids up to look like them, and they're dressing so sexy, and so they're dressing their kids sexy, and now kids are getting sexualized much earlier on. I mean, my brother's classmates were already, my brother is currently 15, and his friends were already talking about shit like this and watching TikToks and talking about porn at like 10. That's concerning that that's the kind of shit kids are starting to do. It's concerning to me that I'm seeing kids who do sexy TikToks at that age. Like, you know, and social media and advertisements are pushing this because guess what? It gives them money if mom sends 11-year-old to Forever 21 to go buy herself a crop top for her new TikTok video where she does the booty shake to the new Cardi B song.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
all of what you're describing really sounds like the outcome, you know, like the end result of while you were talking, I was thinking about, you know, again, my generation and the generation immediately following me, that, you know, the hard reality is they don't know, you know, those parents don't know how important it is, you know, to raise their children better than that. And it's because my generation and the generation preceding mine never told them, right, that, you know, this will result in horrible things happening a long time from now, you know, that I won't be around for, but you will. Right. And, you know, it's like, how do you even approach that with a kid? You know, and I'm talking about the parents that were kids back then, you know, and
And the
at
thing
some
is, those
point,
parents don't have responsibility. That's another part of this. We haven't taught responsibility, and that is a big
no,
issue. Since we're
no.
not teaching responsibility, these parents aren't being responsible. That was my biggest issue, is these parents treated us counselors like we had to raise their damn kid. It is, excuse my French, it is your fucking child. You're supposed to teach them, not us. We're not supposed to be explaining this stuff. We're not supposed to be teaching them not to hit other kids. We're not supposed to be teaching them that there are kids with peanut allergies or this and this and that. You're supposed to teach them. And the only thing these kids got taught to do was to scream in my face that they get to sue me for anything they don't like.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, I wanted to quit that job within about 3 weeks. The only reason I did it is because I need money.
And, you know, the reason for it, right, is that, you know, as you said, they should be raising this kid better than that, right? And, you know, this is that proposes that there's still time to do that, you know. And I guess what I'm saying is that, you know, that dam already broke and the village already got washed away, right? You know, the village of parental and community responsibility is a thing of the past, right? It is gone now. And, you know, that on the one hand, it's certainly understandable for somebody like yourself to say, hey, you know, you needed to do better than this. But the hard reality is that they didn't. You know, this is about the nature of time, right? Time moves only in one direction and at one speed. Those people that, you know, are driving you insane, they can't go back and, you know, do it over again. It's too late, right? So our choices are either, you know, continuing to struggle against it. You know, like I say, like I do with leftists, you know, I tell them everything you're describing is things that already happened, most of them long before I was born, right? You know, it honestly is too late to undo them. So our choices are, you know, either continue squabbling with each other, you know, for eternity from now on until it all goes to hell, you know, or like I said, you know, I don't say this lightly, and I don't say it, you know, like as if I'm saying, oh, you know, the answer is simple. We'll all just hold hands and work together. No, you know, you all know that more than anybody else, I understand the real cost of trying to make this right. You know, I understand that it's going to be a common work the likes of which no one has ever seen before. We're literally proposing to undo generations of mishandling, neglect, corruption, and waste. And that's down all the way down to every family, and all the way up to the presidents and kings. It's going to suck. It's going to be no fun, and there's nothing about it that's going to be pretty. The only thing that makes it worthy of considering is the fact that if it isn't done, then no one will have anything. It will fall.
Yeah. I do want to bring some things up. Like when it comes to like the criticism of we lack education, for example, like I'm totally for it as long as I get confirmation that people are willing to have like tough conversations in schools when it comes to education. Like for example, like as the lady said, like telling like the children need to be more educated on sexuality and all of that, getting sex ed. But like for example, imagine you are in a classroom and you're telling children like, don't do this, like don't have unprotected sex, and because it's wrong, because you can like get pregnant, and then a child like a student tells you that he was born out of wedlock, his father left him, and the mother, single mother, she raised him, and he asks you what's wrong with that. Like, are you saying that like there is something wrong with me and my specific circumstances and my family? And you have to be like tough, and you have to look him in the eyes and say, yes, what happened to you was wrong,
Yeah, I
and
was
as
about
long
to
as
say.
people are weak about it, then that's when I don't have many like I don't have much faith in quote unquote education if we're not willing to have like tough discussions.
Yeah, we need
No.
to be open-minded. That's the thing. For me, it's not the willingness. That's been my issue with education is I've been able to host or other groups host talks on tough issues. The problem is the willing to be open-minded. Because then what ends up happening is it just becomes what I like to call a squawk conversation. Everyone's squawking the same language. They're just repeating one another. No one's actually talking in a tough manner. No one's actually discussing properly. All they're saying is, yeah, I agree. We're all the same opinion. No, it's not a conversation if there is nobody fighting against you, to be frank. If there is not an opposite opinion, you have not had any form of a good collaboration. If no one asks questions or questions you, this was not a conducive, useful.
Yeah, it's just a echo chamber, or a bar fight, and to be fair and to be, maybe empathetic to the people trying and failing to have those conversations. It's a matter of knowing how. I do it routinely in a lot of spaces. I even do it here, right? Where, I push back, I disagree, I point out, that something is missing, right? But I'm pretty good at it. I'll go ahead and brag a little bit. I do well at being persuasive and convincing, but that's mostly because I'm patient, and I'm at a point in my life where, I feel like I can afford to not be desperate because, and I hate to say it this way, I feel that way because I know I am not going to be here for the worst of it. I won't be there, but I persist and I stay with it, because I know Mao and you, tall lady, you guys will be there, and it will be worse, and that is inevitable. Even the best possible outcome where people actually stop, squawking and stop circle jerking and stop polarizing and tribalizing, it's going to be hard and it's going to take a long time. You know, the kind of outcome that avoids, you know, all of you falling into tyranny and savagery and incivility, you won't see the end of that. Okay. You won't see the end of that struggle. Maybe your children won't see the end of that struggle. And that sucks, you know, and when you guys hear me say, I take some responsibility for that upcoming misery, because part of it's a very small part, but part of it's my fault. You know, I could have done something that might have made it a little bit better back when there was still time, but I didn't do it. I was busy being a suicidal drunk, you know, and that, like I said, you know, I own that. That was me, right? If I could convince enough of my own cohort, you know, to start talking that way, then, you know, this room might be a lot more full. So anyway, that's me. Who else has a final thought?
I'll go. Final thoughts. Final thoughts on America. Beautiful country. The general populace themselves as people are okay. Unfortunately, there's an awful lot of social issues that need sorting. An awful lot of systems that need to change for the better. Well, we had a discussion around guns and what have you earlier on, and I think, Taz, you and I are in agreement. It's not a gun issue; it's a mental health issue, and that access to proper healthcare, to things like paid leave from your employment, and what have you, would drastically improve life for the average American. I think that's going to be my final thought. I think the American populace needs to learn to become a bit French from time to time and bring the government to heel when they're not doing the things that they should be doing. Who's next?
I can go next. So one of my final thoughts, it's when it comes to America, and I came late into the discussion. I don't know what the previous discussion was, but I do have a lot to say, and there's some talks in which I don't have much to say about it, and this I feel like I do, and again, like I truly believe that every single problem that America has is just the slow boiling of the frog, in which the previous problems of the destruction of the liberal institutions slowly eroding away, that's constantly catching up and accumulating, and eventually like it becomes even worse with time. And I truly believe that's what we are suffering currently. So I blame it all on the anti-liberalism, the erosion of the liberal institutions, the anti-American sentiment, and the embracing of quote unquote alternatives, which are much worse than whatever the current status quo is. And as a last thing, I wanted to there's something I didn't get to say when we were talking about like the sexualization of children. Like in my opinion, it's I see it as the opposite, is like the desexualization of America. Like there are so many things that we used to understand that they are inherently sexual, like dress in a certain way. Like for example, the way prostitutes clothe themselves. We call that the hooker business attire, you know, and we all understand that's inherently sexual. But when we desexualize certain things, then everything becomes like appropriate for everyone. Like when you get people saying that like dressing in miniskirts, you know, having miniskirts is not sexual, then you lose the power to say that children shouldn't be wearing them. For example, the discussion of the what are they called, the drag queens story hour, whatever that nonsense is. We used to understand such a thing was inherently sexual, but when we desexualize those things, then all of a sudden, what's the big deal about it if it's not sexual? And I believe that's the real issue. It's the desexualization of America, and we need to shake that away. You know, we need to reintroduce the notion that certain things are sexual and therefore not appropriate for children. They should not be dressing like that. They should not be in certain situations. They should not be twerking or putting makeup or going to the strip club or whatever. Yeah, so that is my final thoughts.
Final thoughts. Well, excuse my French one last time. But in Spanish, we have a saying that goes, "Está jodido la cosa," which translates to "the thing is fucked." And usually, I'm a very positive person. When it comes to the U.S., Chihuahua. Unless a lot of things change, and until we start having some more complicated conversations and people start, more of a real we community, I'm gonna be honest, I have better chances moving in with Dead Duck than than I do sticking around here, unfortunately. But I don't have an absolute loss of hope. I mean, there's some good things going on, and to be honest, there are many ways that America is a better country. You know, clean water. You know, you can shop at stores and stuff. So it's a lot better than a lot of places, but it needs a lot of improvement. That's for sure. But hopefully, with things going the way they are, we are a frog in boiling water, but it seems. But hopefully, people are starting to wake up to that fact and jump out of the pot. But I don't know, and that's what I'm checking out with. Sorry, guys, trying to be positive. Don't let this bring you down. Have a good day.
Hey, for next week, maybe we should talk about everything positive. So I kind of have a lot, and I think it's worth a conversation. So maybe we'll go through that next time.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Well,
Sounds good.
all right. Thank you all, All Lady and Mao and Dead Duck. Appreciate you taking the time out of your day to talk to me and talk to everyone listening. And to everyone listening, thank you for listening. Please join us again next week. And until then, have a great week. Thank you.
Cheerio.
Bye bye.
Yes.